listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. Today is May 27th, 2024, and my name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host, Jason Lucas. Jason, how are you doing this fine Monday?
Hello, Spencer. Hello. I'm doing well. I'm at the end of a long weekend here, so I'm a little sleepy. It wasn't exactly the rest and relaxation I was hoping for. Had a lot of stuff going on, but had plenty of time for WoW, which was nice. So I'm doing well, and had a much more chill Monday than typically I would have had by the time that we're speaking.
Yeah, I mean, typically, yes. Typically there's like a meeting that you have to go to, and you come out of the meeting. We try and get everything all arranged so that we can get a record in during a lunch break, and it's just there's a whole thing that happens. So we're very glad that we had the extra time today, because I was the one with the meeting today, so it threw off our schedule. We're recording Monday at about 5:30 p.m. Eastern time for folks who are curious. And it's been a heck of a past week. Lots of World of Warcraft happening all over the place in different game modes and versions. I did still spend the majority of my World of Warcraft time inside of Pandaria. I recognized, hey, you know what? I kind of want to finish off my Trader's Tender for the week, so I might as well just look at what the not achievements, but the unlocks were for the Mists of Pandaria remix. Knock those things out so that I can have enough currency in Trader's Tender to buy the stuff I want to buy in Trader's Tender. So I did hop back in there and play a little bit more. I did do LFR, which everyone was kind of like pushing me towards doing some more organized content. Still couldn't get into a normal mode, but I did do LFR, and I just sort of knocked out a bunch of bosses. And yes, that does accelerate the cloak pretty dramatically. I was already over 100%, so it wasn't like it was a large benefit gain for me at this point. But we will talk more about that particular type of World of Warcraft with Mists of Pandaria Remix later in the show, because there were some more fixes that came in this past week to try and help people along when it came to getting enough currency for that sort of thing. But what did you get up to this past week, Jason?
It was kind of a weird week because I was out on Wednesday night. I took the kids out to a baseball game, so I was not around for raid time. And then we typically don't do like scheduled raids on Sundays of holiday weekends because I just don't want to make anybody feel obligated or whatever. So I only had Tuesday night for raid. So we did, it was Aberrus week, right? We did Heroic Skip, which is just 3 bosses actually. So just went in there and knocked out Neltharion and Sark, which was fine, pretty quick. I mean, we're super powerful at this point for Heroic Raid, so feeling pretty good. We reset and did some Mythic, and we were pretty comfortable with the first 3 bosses on Mythic from back in Season 2, which we were doing like routinely. And I mean, really, they're pretty easy. They're really easy when you have as much relative power as we do against the mode at this point. So that was cool. Get some extra crests. Get everybody a Mythic vault choice from Raid Gear for Tuesday. Well, that was actually like it for Raid. I ended up doing a bunch of keys. I played on an off night and kind of rounded some people up and strong-armed them into doing some keys with me so I could get my vault filled up with 522s, so I could get my aspect crest capped, which is like, it's a little bit awkward because the math doesn't work out super great. And if you can get 3 bosses down on Mythic at least, and you get 30 crests, then if you time 8 10s, then you're capped. But if you don't time one of them, then you have to do more to cap out. And also, like, I can buy crests, but you have to buy them in multiples of 15. Like if you are fewer than 15 crests below cap, you can't buy them. So I ended up like pugging into a +6 just to finish. I needed like 1 crest, but my brain wouldn't stop itching until that number turned red. So I was like, let me find like an Algathar 6. Like I'll find the easiest thing that will give me any aspect crest, and I'll just go blow that up. So I'm up to like 2733 rating, which is pretty nice considering I haven't been really trying to push. My number one goal is just to be done with aspect crests, and then just do like 8, and just roll the dice on the vault and just kind of chill. I kind of slacked off on the outdoor stuff on the monk and druid this week. I started up on the monk. I had a monk day, and I did my my last hurrah on the monk, and I did LFR, but I did 3 LFR bosses and I didn't get a bullion. And I was like, I'm not doing any more of this. Like, I'm not going to go do another LFR wing because it's not an even bullion week, so I can't even buy anything anyway. I'm just going to do LFR next week, and then once I finally get bullion, I'll get them both. And that, then I just kind of ended up in remix land, and I didn't circle back to the druid. But those tunes are both sort of getting to the point where 480 item level items are not actually very interesting anyway. The rest of the week I spent a lot of time in remix. There were some really great changes that came through this week that we'll get into a bit later, but I sort of have this daily checklist now on the remix tune, which I was maybe a little concerned about not really having, or at least not having one that felt great. But so I'll get in every day now. I'll do all the world bosses. I'll do a normal and heroic scenario and dungeon. I'll do an LFR wing, and just stack up a bunch of cloak stats and a bunch of bronze. One thing I did discover this week, because I just really didn't pay attention the first, I would say, week or so. It was kind of just like a fire hose of stuff in remix, and so I wasn't really keyed in on this, but a lot of the new and unique rewards from the mode actually don't come from the bronze vendors. They come from doing meta achievements inside various different types of content. So stuff like the farmer's backpack with the chicken and the frying pan on it, or the sake barrel backpack, or Chen's hat that you can wear on your head or your back, the ox, the baby ox pet, the golden celestial dragon mount. All that stuff is not available from a vendor. You get it by doing achievements. So I started really digging into those and working on those. And I got all that stuff. The only thing I haven't finished is Dread Wastes, because I just haven't been out there really. And there's a weapon illusion that's like a Shaw Touch looking thing from that. So that's on my list. I went and did the Landfall campaign from 5.1 this week to get the class stuff, the recolors from the trading post. I think that was the armor. And then I did the Isle of Thunder meta achievement to unlock the class weapons. It's funny because those were on my bronze list of I definitely want to buy these, but then when you do the achievement on a tune, you just get them. So that was bronze I didn't have to spend, and now it's unlocked. So I made a monk, which I haven't really played too much yet. I got to get in there and get the monk to farm out 7K bronze, and then I can buy that stuff. And then that is that character's only mission in life. The reason for its existence is to get 7K bronze to buy those two sets of items.
The monk is a lot of fun. That's what I've been playing in remix. So it's definitely
monk is awesome.
Yeah, it's very fun.
I dig it. I mean, I don't really need another level 70 monk, so I may level it up just for the bonuses that you get for leveling, which again we'll get into more later. But one thing though is I bought the Shadow Pan sets. There's a silverish one and a gold tinged one, and then I hooked up my Pandaren monk with the Shadow Pan armor, with Chen's hat and the sake barrel on his back, and mogged his weapon to one of the Legion artifacts. And I've had this character since Mists of Pandaria came out, and finally he looks cool. It took 12 years, but I finally have good mog for my monk, so I'm really happy with that.
Up to this point, one of the best mog for monks that was out there was the original starting set that you got when you were first leveling your monk. You got a really nice, very Pandaren looking monk set, even with that belt with the dangles that came off of the ties, with the paw symbol for monks. All of that was part of the OG starting gear for a monk.
Yeah, it was the timeless Isle gear or whatever. Yeah, I hung on to that stuff because that is one of the better looks. But so I'm really happy with that. I think I didn't understand the structure of how those rewards were distributed, and I was getting stuff I was going on, but I didn't put it together, Right. I got the backpack, the chicken backpack, and I was like, oh, that's cool, but I just thought it was some kind of random thing I got out of a treasure chest or something. Right. But then I actually went and looked, and I went, oh, okay, so this is my project. My most immediate thing is let's do all these achievements and get all this cool stuff that is specifically from the event. So
that's why I was questing through all the zones.
Yeah. I mean, because most of them are. The cool thing is you have some flexibility in how you do those achievements. So it's campaign quest is always one of them. So it's always on the table is to do the campaign in that zone, and then the other ones, it's usually do 2 of 4, and there's the campaign quest, and there's like group content that's affiliated with that zone. There's like kill rares, open treasures, and it's not like kill all the rares. It's kill like 3 different rares, and it might be like open these 4 specific treasures or whatever. So it's pretty friendly. It's just you got to know to go do it, and I didn't for the first like week. And
Right.
So I spent some time like Saturday really just going through, and I was only a couple items off of most of these achievements, but I had to do like all of Throne of Thunder LFR, and it wasn't bad, but I don't really recommend that. Like I just didn't. I wasn't in the mindset of like, let me sit down and do all of the Isle of Thunder quests. I love Isle of Thunder, but I just wasn't trying to do that, and I felt like LFR would be faster, but it was mildly, like psychic damage inflicting,
Yes.
doing that much. Yeah, I mean the LFRs in this mode are not like hard, but Throne of Thunder doesn't really lend itself super well to LFR. I don't, even though I love that raid. So that was kind of a long night, but I got it done and I got the stuff I wanted, so I was pretty happy.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Man, so yes, there is a lot to talk about in World of Warcraft this week. We're going to hop into what's going on in the live game right now. All right, this week in World of Warcraft is the World Quest bonus event, which means reputation gains from World Quests are increased by 50%, as well as there's a quest to essentially get 10 of these World Quests done, which gets you 2,500 reputation to the major faction of your choice, including Loam Niffen and Dream Wardens. So if you're still trying to catch up on some reps, or there's some rewards you're still looking for, that's a great way to do it. Just keep in mind the World Quest bonus event also goes across expansions, which means if there's things from previous expansions that had World Quests that you want to get extra rewards from, this is another good time to go back and revisit those and get more reputation from those, which is a good thing to keep in mind. So
yeah, I mean, one thing I would point out this week, probably, unless there's like something that you're really gunning for, like you need Loam Niffen rep because you just didn't bother. Like it's Dream Warden's bonus rep, right? So
Yep.
it's like it's Dream Warden's and Valdrakken Accord, I guess, are bonus reps this week. So you might want to just use it for that because you'll get like a huge chunk of a Paragon bag. I can't remember. Is it like a token that I think it's a token that you get. So you just hang on to it. If you're doing Loam Niffen, take that token and just hold on to it for 2 more weeks until it's Zaralik Cavern week. Because why not get the extra bonus on top of it, The Sign of the Emissary is awesome, but it only applies to actually completing world quests. Whereas like the zone rotation is just like blanket, any rep is just increased.
yeah, I mean, that's definitely a factor as well. So definitely keep that in mind too. Okay, moving on, we have the last hurrah that everyone should be hopping into and jumping into. This is the Emerald Dream, where you get 100 coalesced Dream Surge essence, as well as 50 bloomed earning during the Super Bloom, and then the Super Bloom needs to be completed, as well as 3 Dream Seeds planted. If you do all that, you get yourself your last hurrah reward, which is worth getting. Then Comp Stomp is going on with Arathi Basin against AI bots. That is the brawl for the week. So if you're someone who wants to get yourself a bunch of really easy honor, or wants to have a good time just in general beating up bots, you can do that inside the PvP world. That is absolutely an option. So be sure that you are taking advantage of Comp Stomp. I know, Jason, this is like your favorite brawl.
Yeah, it's super fun. If you actually like PvP, this may not be the brawl for you, but it's pretty cool to just go into Arathi Basin and just, dominate it. Like the advanced AI bots are better than like a mob, behavior, but they're still not really all that smart. So you should be able to go in there and have a good time regardless of what your PvP skill level is really like. So, yeah, it could be a good option this week if you want to hop into some PvP, but you're not really trying to get too intense with it. Comp Stomp is perfect for that. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, just watch out for those comp warlocks. Those AI warlocks can still pack a big punch, so keep that in mind. They can sneak up on you a little bit. All right, weekly world boss is Oristar the Hibernator. It's a big old awakened dream bear in Emerald Dream, so be sure you're collecting your 499 loot off of that world boss this week. Mythic Plus affixes are Fortified, Storming, and Bursting. So non-boss enemies have 20% more health and deal 30% increased damage, as well as in combat, enemies periodically summon damaging whirlwinds. And when slain, non-boss enemies explode, causing all players to suffer damage over time. And this effect stacks. It's going to be last 4 seconds is the actual effect of the dot that's out there. Okay, so Fortified Bursting is never really wonderful and fantastic to sort of run into. Fortified just means that you're basically dealing with all your trash having more health and dealing increased damage, which means AoE effects deal more damage. And it also means that when something dies and you get bursting stacks on people, it's that much more dangerous because the trash is already hitting people harder. And so those bursting stacks can do more damage. The advantage to fortified bursting is that really low health enemies that normally just explode and die instantly take that little bit longer to die. So when your, DPS squad goes, just absolute, I guess, ape brain or like default DPS brain, they can essentially not blow a pack up so quickly that it kills your whole raid team or whole instance team. So hopefully people are paying enough attention early on that they can use their AoE spells respectively and not have bursting spread to the entire raid and her entire group and wipe your group. Man, you can tell that I just came out of a 3-hour meeting. My brain is a little mush. I apologize. But yes, so the overall, I think this week is an okay fortified week. It's just, I think bursting, which a lot of people won't run into because you're not going to be doing keys high enough. It's the highest end affix. So if you're just, not doing keys that are that high, you don't have to worry about it. But I think storming's kind of a non-affix when it comes down to things like this. It doesn't really work with or against anything in general. But fortified bursting is probably something you just need to be watching out for, making sure you're controlling those bursting stacks, dispelling the debuff when you can. Jason, what are you feeling about this?
I think this week's pretty good. This is it's very similar. It's like a fortified version of last week's combo, right? Like storming is melee volcanic basically, and bursting is sort of it's more of a healer affix, whereas sanguine is more of like a tanking affix, right? Like the tank should set you up for success with mob positioning and moving around and stuff when it comes to sanguine, and DPS should pay attention to like killing the thing that's farthest back or like spamming ranged attacks or whatever, whereas this week, DPS should pay attention, like not blowing everything up to strain the healer unnecessarily. Bursting bursting can be problematic, but it isn't as bad as it used to be overall. It is dispellable, of course. Healers dispel yourself, and then, if somebody dies, then they die. But yeah, at least that way you're alive, and that'll save you the most time.
Well, yeah, that's the biggest tip is always healers dispel yourselves first, because the person you forget most often is yourself. Believe it or not, as a healer, they're a fairly selfless role, and you're much more focused on what's happening to your tank or one of your DPSs who gets spiked all the time than you are on what's happening to you. So the best thing you can do, yes, is dispel yourself first. If you can then dispel other people, great, but otherwise you've now ensured your own survival, which then is more likely to ensure other people's, as opposed to you get two ticks into bursting and you die, and then now you really
right.
can't help anyone else, so everyone else dies.
It's just a cascade of people dying at that point.
Yes.
But a good thing about this week too is it's not super comp dependent, much like last week. We had that, that spot in the rotation where we had so many ghosts. Right, we had like Incorporeal and Spiteful, I think, together, and then we had Afflicted the next week, and it's like, all right, it's so many extra mobs or, just health bars in the dungeon that you're trying to pay attention to, and you really need certain classes to address certain problems. This isn't like that. Bursting's not going to be a factor on bosses, so bosses are going to feel pretty good. Storming could come into a play with a few bosses in this pool. One I'm thinking specifically of is last boss in Halls of Infusion. The big water Ellie, you have a lot of positioning concerns with that, and there's already a lot of stuff swirling around and getting in your way, and then you have this phase where you got to run down the hallway and avoid hazards in the ground. So there's a couple that could be a little bit less favorable with storming, but in general there's a lot of counterplay with storming. You don't have to move very far usually to get out of one. So overall I think it's pretty good. Especially like as we continue to gear up and get more really optimized setups for our tunes, I think Fortified is going to become sort of preferable for keys in that 8 to 10 range, because you're going to be able to just do so much AoE damage to the trash, and then the bosses are going to be quick. The good thing too is this week there's nothing holding you in combat, and any of those ghost type affixes they waste so much time, and when you're already in a fort week, it's like, oh, can we just move on to the next section, please? So Overall, I think it's gonna be a good week. I do want to point out, just while we're in this sort of weekly checklist section, this is an even bullion week, so you will be able to get another item off the vendor this week. So just, even if you're not like a regular raider, make sure you get in some LFR or something this week and get your item of choice. And just keep in mind the rotation too. Like the next thing I really want is from Vault of the Incarnates, but that's not up until next week. But then again, the item that I really want from there is from a boss that I'm unlikely to kill on Mythic, so there's really no reason not to buy it on the Awaken track. So that's kind of my plan. But yeah, I think it pays to be a little bit judicious with how you spend them, because if the item that you want, is coming up soon in the rotation, you might want to think about waiting to see if you get a drop, because then you can get the next item down the list and whatever.
Right.
But yeah, that is an even bullion week, so you will be getting new items once you get into some raid bosses of some type and get your bullion drop.
Awesome. The other thing we want to highlight is there was actually another short story that came out. This one's by Christy Golden, and it is highlighting essentially what Anduin's been up to since he sort of came back and trying to identify really deal with the PTSD that he's gone through, and sort of heading out to Stormsong Valley to sort of figure these sorts of things out. I don't want to spoil any of the story, but it is Anduin focused, and it is about after he's returned from Shadowlands and out of isolation and trying to actually deal with those issues. So it's called The Calling. There'll be obviously a link to it in the show notes if you want to check it out. These short stories are always great. They're great ways to bridge between expansions, and I assume with a pre-patch event coming up at some point in the next few months, we will be seeing more and more of this sort of short story tying into what we see in game.
Yeah, it's the second one in the series we've seen so far. I wonder how many of them they're going to do. Maybe a couple more. Usually these things come in like 3s or 4s.
Yeah.
And they always have some of this kind of publishing stuff that they promote the expansions with, and that comes out pretty far in advance. So I think it's cool because you get to see like a little snapshot of one character and really explore them a bit, and just kind of set the stage for where they are coming into the new expansion, which is nice. I haven't read this yet. Like I said, I said a couple weeks ago when the last short story came out, I'm a little behind in my WoW fiction right now, so I want to get all caught up before War Within comes out. So it's on my list. I downloaded a copy of the PDF, but I didn't actually read it yet because I'm not ready. It's not its turn,
yet.
right?
I agree.
Yeah,
my brain is not in War Within mode yet.
I got to sit down and sit back down with War of the Scaleborn and just reread the thing, and just because like I said, I picked it up when it came out. I mean, it came out right before BlizzCon, right? I remember I got my copy like the day before I was leaving.
Yeah.
But then like I didn't actually have any time to read it when I was traveling or anything, and then I came back and tried to read it, but it's rare that I have that much time to sit down and just read a novel. So I'm a little backed up, and then it's like, well, I don't really want to read the War Within stories till I finish that. So I don't know. It's cool. Christy unfortunately got laid off recently. She was working in story and franchise development, but she did so much stuff for Blizzard and for Warcraft as a concept before she ever was an employee there. So obviously I'm sure she wrote this like while she was still an employee, but hopefully, it's her not being in their employ doesn't mean it's like the last, Christy Golden stuff that we see. I mean, I feel like for the novels and stuff, she's sort of been the standard bearer. I think the stuff she's done has been among my favorites. So I hope that we get more long form Christy Golden stuff about Warcraft characters in the future. And cool to see that she had a War Within prequel story.
Yeah, it's always difficult when you see these sorts of things happen. I mean, no one ever wants to see the WoW team get smaller. No one ever wants to see creative minds that are dedicated to it move away and do other things. Obviously, this wasn't her choice to move away and do other things. It was a decision that was made. However, I do think that this is a world that she probably loves, and I'd be shocked if there wasn't somewhere down the line where they contract her to do a book or write some more stuff for them here and there. I feel like this is very much, I don't know if you remember this. This was back in, I think this was actually end of Cataclysm, when they basically went in and laid off all of their music people, everyone who did all the soundtrack stuff, Browder and all them, are just gone. Man, it was crazy to feel that happen. But yeah, it was just, again, one of those situations where I think they needed to shrink down the amount of in-house on salary people they had. And so they did that. And hopefully, just like we've seen in subsequent expansions, they just contract people in to work on it that still have a passion for it and want to actually do stuff for it. So I'm hoping we see that. I'm hoping we see that kind of stuff come back. All right. As far as let's do Season of Discovery, because it's really short. It's just one little bit for people. There was a hotfix thrown out this past week that changed a bunch of raid loot for Sunken Temple from being non-epics into epics. So they restatted and reorganized the stats on a lot of these pieces. There's only one that had me sort of raising an eyebrow, which was a mask, a caster mask, where they removed the spirit from it entirely. I think their goal was to try and shift that over to being primarily a DPS cloth piece. But in doing so, they changed the mask that people had gathered for their healing classes, and now they have a mask that's not ideal for their healing class. That is unfortunate. That's kind of stuff they try and avoid, I know. But that was the only case where I saw that. Other than that, it's nice changes to see. I don't think this will get more people into Sunken Temple. I don't think this will get more people back into doing this kind of content. I still think they need to basically go through and say, hey, we are tuning all the bosses inside this place so that a 12-man raid team or a 14-person raid team can get in there and clear this place without really having to stress too much over it. I think that will actually bring back those clears. Our team has not raided for the past 2 weeks because we just haven't had enough people. We get that 11 or 12 person kind of roster put together and we're just down. Like we have 22 people on the roster and people just aren't available or aren't interested and aren't signing up. And you get that like, hey, we have 13 people or 12 people. And you're like, all right, well, I guess we're not raiding because like we might be able to kill 1 or 2 bosses, but that's it. And it's going to be a slog to do that. And clearing the trash through there is a pain in the butt as is. So I think they do need to go in and look at the raid and go, all right, let's tune everything down. Let's make this accessible to smaller groups and we'll start seeing people get in there and clearing again. So hopefully that happens soon.
Yeah, it seems like more like an olive branch to the people that are still kind of playing or trying to, round out groups more than anything, because it's just it's a bit too like esoteric for somebody who hasn't been playing it, right? You have no frame of reference for what Sunken Temple's like or what the gear was like, and so and they didn't specify like what they did to it. They just said it's better. Like there wasn't. You'll notice that Spencer didn't read an itemized list of changes to the gear because Tyvex didn't provide one. So it's just the gear is just better, which is cool. But yeah, I think to me, like I thought the same thing that you just said, which is like cool for people who are still kind of plugging away, but not really gonna influence people to maybe check back in on SOD or whatever. I mean, it's probably necessary change overall.
Well,
but
it was a necessary change. Point, yeah, they sorry, I want to pop in one thing. They expressed one thing about it in an earlier post, which was they weren't sure where the power level was going to be for level 60 content. And now that they've worked on phase 4 and they know where the power level is going to be, they recognize they could increase the power level on the Sunken Temple stuff so that there's a better transition between the two levels of gear. And that is why we saw them okaying a lot of these buffs. And yeah, there is an itemized list, but it's over on Wowhead. They didn't provide anything. Wowhead data mined and ripped out all of the different items and showed you the comparables. But yes, sorry, as you were saying, you don't think you're going to see a lot of people come back for this, I imagine?
Yeah, like I mean, the barrier to entry here is just too high, and so like this is a cool bonus for people that have been sticking it out and that are dedicated to the mode, and I'm glad they did something for those people. I don't know how they like kickstart those good vibes around SOD again for phase 4 and beyond. I think the delay can only help. I know that people are going to be upset about it or whatever, but I feel like so many people just checked out of SOD anyway that it probably makes sense to give that team a little extra breathing room to figure out like, okay, what can we like inject into this release that's really going to grab people's attention? How can we make people feel good about playing this again? I think that's the challenge for the mode right now. So more time is probably better, even if it's disappointing.
More often than not with these different game modes or events that are happening, there's very much the how do we make sure that this lands in the positive column in the first 10 days? Because if it doesn't, we see a massive drop off. That's what I notice. Like a lot of the changes coming in, which we're about to talk about for WoW Remix, had they gone in the first 4 or 5 days of this being out, I think they would have sustained a much larger group of people engaged in this event and enjoying being engaged in this event as opposed to considering it sort of like a chore that they're trying to get done. Then what we're currently at right now, where we were, it's been out for a couple of weeks, and now we're starting to see changes come in where you're like, hey, this should have been in there either pre-day one, or this should have been in there at least in the first couple of days that it was out. And I get the wait and see, but I do feel like the gaming industry right now has so many things. And when you have World of Warcraft essentially competing with other versions of World of Warcraft for people's time, you need to be landing things pretty consistently. Otherwise, you're going to see people sort of dismiss it, and getting them back is really hard. I'm seeing that with Diablo 4 actually right now. They currently have a new season out that's very well done and very good, but everyone was so turned off by the previous seasons that they've just given up on it. No one wants to try it anymore, and there's no interest. And you're like, that's really unfortunate, because they're doing something really cool, and it's certainly more engaging and fun than it's ever been. But again, had this been in that first 2-week, 3-week period where they'd figured these problems out, or before the thing launched, there is that learning curve of 2020 hindsight, but still, like, brutal to see them put a lot of effort and great things into a game and then try and drag people back to the game mode.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Diablo 4 thing, I've been playing it a bit and really enjoying it. And I really didn't think much of Diablo 3 after I finished, or Diablo 4 after I finished the campaign last year.
Yeah.
That seems like they just didn't learn the lessons of the past. And it's like, why did it take a year to get optimized, like good loot that felt good to get and a path to power up? Like, they learned that lesson before our eyes in Diablo 3. With MOP Remix, like, we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff that they changed this past week. I feel like it maybe would have benefited from more PTR time, to be honest.
100%. Yeah.
They did like that one PTR weekend, and it was like, that's not enough time to really to run into the stuff where you go, that works like that. Wouldn't it be cool if, or like, I don't feel like I'm getting enough of whatever, because people are just leveling up and kind of messing around with there's no stakes, right? The character's going away. Well, so I feel like maybe I know they wanted to preserve some of the magic and the coolness of the event itself, but I think maybe just like a little bit more time on PTR, they would have been like, okay, we need to goose these rewards a bit to make people feel good about it.
And you can say the same thing about Plunderstorm, right? Like in both situations, they tried to keep something really mysterious. In Plunderstorm's case, gave no access to it ahead of time. In Mist's case, they did minor, like that one weekend. It was here and gone before I even got a chance to even think about it. So it's one of those cases where, like, in both cases, they really limited their window for getting player feedback on what this was. And we saw them come out now, a month after it was out, or several months after it had been out, with really good changes that made it a lot more fun and a lot more enjoyable. And you're like, had it launched in this state, and you're like, yeah, if it had it launched in that state, I think it would have had a much better reception. And the best way to get that sort of feedback is essentially what they're doing right now with War Within Alpha, going, hey, here's the early alpha build, go and play it and give us feedback, please. And you're like, great, do that more often.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, I know they wanted Plunderstorm to be a big, cool surprise, and it was for sure. And I mean, I think that once they made all they did like a couple rounds of tuning changes, which were necessary, but you'd expect that after no matter what kind of testing they do, private, public, or otherwise, like, there's going to be tuning changes once it's live. But once they buffed up the reward structure, then it felt good. Once they sort of made 2 rounds of changes to the reward structure, then it felt good. And you knew that bonus holiday was coming at some point during the event, because that's just how they do these things. But like, even before the bonus event, it still felt good. It's like, okay, in a reasonable amount of time, I can get a renown rank. But it just, like, had it just come out that way, then, I mean, I know for myself, I would have had a much different opinion of it overall, even tuning aside, right? Because what I really wanted to do was unlock the rewards and just kind of mess around the mode and have a good time. But when you do a game and maybe the game goes in a decent direction, or maybe it goes in a direction you're unhappy with, you step out of it and you got like a 5th or a 7th of a renown rank, you're like, what are we doing here? But luckily it didn't stay in that state for very long.
Yeah, fortunately. All right, let's move into Remix World, because there's a lot to talk about in here. So on May 20th, we got hot fixes, and we're going to break them up by date, because there's literally so many of them that happen that it's important to actually mention it this way. They did make it so that shirts and tabards were purchasable from vendors, in case people were looking for shirts and tabards. That's something you could do. But Jason, there's some notes in here that you highlighted that I'll let you start running through here.
Yes.
Just that you can dig into it first.
we saw some bug fixes and stuff, obviously, but yeah, I think like going through the notes in chronological order helps to kind of tell the story of what happened this past week with the game. So one of the things they did was they reduced enemy power scaling in group content to be less aggressive. They said that it's particularly applicable to player level 40 to 70 before players have been able to power up their cloak, upgrade their gems, and increase their item level. This is really important because I mean, I didn't have this experience. Okay, I'm just gonna say it that way. I leveled to 70. I played kind of sparingly until I did some normal raid with the guild team. Felt fine in normal raid and started really getting some power from that point on. And then, doing heroic dungeons and whatever. I like last Monday night, I sat down, I did all my heroic dungeons and heroic scenarios. I got my rings and trinkets, and I was feeling pretty good. But I heard some people in guild and some other places, complaining about just unexpected deaths to stuff, especially in some of the scenarios. I think some of the scaling was kind of weird. So they kind of smoothed that out. I mean, this is like even though this is super accelerated, it's a traditional kind of WoW power curve where as you get up to level cap, you sort of have that your power actually kind of dips because of the way that stat points work and how they translate into how rating translates into stat percentage. But then sort of the expectation of your baseline power at max level. So like you get to 70 and then you need to gear and power up a bit. Now in addition to that, they also did some stuff like they improved gear drop rates from rares, rare elites, quests, which first of all, once you get to max level and you start getting those 346s, it's going to help you fill in spots that maybe you didn't get as you leveled up, which is really important. And also that means you have more gear to scrap, and then you get more bronze, which you can then use to power up more or buy stuff that you want. So I felt this a bit. I didn't feel like the gear drop rates were terrible, but I definitely feel like I've been getting a bit more gear since last week. They also added a first-time bonus for queuing each LFR wing that grants a threat of experience in addition to the bronze cache. And this is every wing every day, which is that's kind of a lot. I mean, it's a lot of time to be spending an LFR, but it's like 7% to the cloak for each wing that you do. And you can start queuing at 25. If you did whatever it is, rank 12 of the cloak achievement, I think, then you start with 100% bonus XP on it all anyway. So if your main goal is just like level up mega fast, then you should kind of always be sitting in an LFR wing while you're doing other stuff. LFR is pretty face roll in my experience. I've done most of the wings so far, and like do Mogushan vaults or something, man, and the bosses literally die in like 20 seconds. So that was a nice addition. They also added bonus experience for the bosses in normal dungeons and scenarios. And also 2 heroic scenarios, heroic dungeons already had this bonus experience. But so all these queued activities, they seeded more experience into. Also, this was very noticeable this week. They increased the number of prismatic gems dropped from bosses in normal and heroic scenarios and dungeons. Prismatic gems are how you really power up your character and stat up your character. Well, one of the ways. I mean, obviously the Tinker gems are very powerful and they scale with your item level. But if you want to hit those particular stats, you need gems and you need a lot of them. So I've definitely been feeling like I'm getting way more gems from a play session than I was before. And they also, this was last Monday night, they increased the bronze granted from all qualities of bronze caches by 25%. So it's just whatever the baseline was from anything that awarded any kind of a bronze cache, an achievement, a daily quest, a daily reward for a match-made activity. On Monday, that all got bumped up by 25% baseline. So just starting to up that bronze yield, starting to smooth out that kind of early level 70 power gap. Just narrow that gap a little bit so you can get in and start having fun in end game. Pretty good changes. I think really the gem thing was huge. That was the biggest one for me, because I sort of got to a point where it's like, all right, Monday night I got 9 new sockets, right? I need to put stuff in them, and I want to get some stats, and you need like hundreds of gems to get hooked up with the stats that you want at legendary quality. So that was a really nice change. In addition, that was the one that jumped out the most to me for like where I'm at in remakes. But all this other stuff was I think they hit on some really good stuff here.
They did. They definitely hit on a lot of good notes. This, I think, helped out a lot of players who are currently starting to get into the more end game farming type of thing that they were actually looking to do. This was not the change that like made it way more fun for me to level very much when it came to this. Just for me, I think there was some, the changes to LFR certainly helped a little bit, but in general, the Tuesday changes is where things started to get a little bit more spicy for me. And then obviously as we moved into Wednesday changes and then Thursday changes, we started to see them go, okay, every day they are basically trying to roll out as much as they possibly can to make this stuff happen. But the Tuesday changes were a little bit more substantial, Jason.
Yeah, so this is where, I mean, the Tuesday changes last week were specifically the ones that, like, for me and the way that I play and what I'm looking to get out of Remix, this is the one that sort of ignited my brain and, like, kicked off my daily loop. Because they introduced these daily rewards called spools. And they come in 4 different qualities up to greater spools, which are orange quality, and they give plus 180 of a stat to your cloak at a shot, which is a lot of stat rating just for doing one particular thing. What they said was we made the following changes to improve thread of time gain for the cloak. The goal is to give players access to more threads from daily repeatable sources, and they should serve as readily attainable power-ups from a wide variety of content. So you get them from the following. You get them from your Infinite Bizarre repeatable dailies. So this means there's a quest to do a scenario daily. There's a quest to kill 3 dungeon bosses, and there's a quest to kill 2 raid bosses. And there's 3 different Infinite Flight Draconids that offer these quests in any bazaar that you go to. So you want to log in every day and pick these up. In addition to that, so I mean those are right there. That's 3 of these greater spools if you're at max level that you get just for doing those quests. In addition to that, you also get another greater spool from your first daily scenario, daily dungeon, and each LFR queue of the day. So that's another many, depending on how much stomach you have for LFR, but it's a bunch. Plus, you get them from world bosses, and there are, 6 world bosses? What I do every day is I log in, I pick up my quest, I fly to Galleon, then I fly to Shaw of Anger, then I fly to Undasta, then I go out to Isle of Thunder and I do Nalak, then I go to Timeless Isle and I do whatever Celestial is currently being killed, and then over to Ordos. So that's 6 right there. I mean, this is so much stats for what you have to do this. I mean, the bosses just fall over. Undasta used to be hard back in like 2013. Like you die trying to do Undasta. It doesn't work that way anymore. You just go over there and kill it, and you get big stats for your cloak. You also get them from Remix achievements. Unfortunately, these weren't like retroactive, so that kind of a bummer. But I mean, whatever. This is a daily reward every day for the next several months. And also they added to this Probes of Thunder King scenario, which I haven't done yet in Remix, and I don't know how I haven't been able to work that into the loop yet. But I mean, these things are huge for stat in your character. My character's starting to get really significant amounts of secondary stats from the cloak, and just from being able to scale up my gems and stuff. So that feels really good, and this is a very high priority for me because I want to make my character powerful in whatever kind of content I'm doing. So yeah, that was a great change this week. And they did some more like tuning changes and bug fixes as well with that pass the other day on Tuesday. They reduced creature health in heroic scenarios by up to 25%.
Yeah.
Which I think this was good because heroic scenarios felt really weird. Even when I was like last Monday when I was just banging them all out to get my achievement, it's like, man, some of this stuff is alive for like a really unnecessarily long time. So that felt good. They also scaled down Timeless Isle, Isle of Giants, Isle of Thunder creatures a bit. They bug fixed some gems that weren't scaling up based on player level properly. They did some adjustments to threat because like some spell gems that put a shield on you were causing threat. Healing was doing too much threat. Everybody's healing a lot, because of leech and all that stuff. So that also made it kind of weird. So just cleaning some stuff up a little bit, which was cool. So, the greater spool thing, that totally changed everything for me, because it's like, okay, I now have a checklist of like easily accessible stuff, that most of which I was already going to do anyway, like my daily scenario, daily dungeon, whatever. But like, okay, now I like actively want to do this, and I can, I get tangible benefits to my character from doing it. And plus it feels good as everybody starts, powering up and scaling up to just like kill an LFR boss in 18 seconds and like just blast through a heroic dungeon. So, that was cool. That was the one that really kicked in for me. And it's like, okay, well, I know what I'm doing basically every day I can while this event's running.
Yeah, the spools were a big thing. Threads and spools were really a big thing that got me with this update, as far as just going, oh, okay, this actually feels really good. Giving me a tangible, you can do it in 15 minutes and knock it out kind of reward that feels a lot more rewarding. But I will say a result of them doing hotfixes all through the week last week was my brain going, maybe I'll just take a month off from this and then just see where the game mode's at that point, right? Like not try and put too much effort in now if they're going to continue doing changes to encourage players to actually, enjoy the game mode more. Maybe I should not be along for the ride on a daily basis at the moment, which is what I'd encourage everyone to sort of consider for themselves of, hey, you know what? Mop Remix is going to be around for another 75 days or whatever it is. Skipping 30 of them right now might not be that bad of a thing. You might end up having a much better experience coming in 30 days late to this and then just starting to play around with it and game with it and see how that goes. Because I will say that with a fix that an actual patch notes fix that we'll talk about in a little bit here, I definitely was like, ooh, alts. I actually want to do alts again in this, as opposed to right now, which was like, I don't really feel like there's a big motivation or benefit to leveling multiple characters at the moment. So if I'm just trying to get rewards. So I'm excited to see some more changes coming in with this. But before we get into those,
I just want to expand on your point a little bit, because I had like a sort of a similar reaction to that this week as these changes were coming in so rapid fire and really reshaping like what Remix was about for me. But it wasn't in the mold of like, well, maybe I should just wait until they really until everything's locked in. But I was sitting on like 200k bronze, and I hadn't really bought anything substantial, and I hadn't upgraded my gear yet. And I'm like, they're making so many changes. I do not want to spend all this bronze to upgrade my gear and then be in a situation where the gear upgrades got massively discounted, and then like I know I'm not getting a refund.
Yeah.
But as things kind of progress throughout the week, I sort of got the sense that they are not going to budge on the cost to upgrade in terms of how much bronze they cost, but what they are going to do is continue to buff bronze yield and put more bronze in more places for you to acquire. And so that's kind of the thought process I'm currently following. So then I ended up, leveling up my gear a bunch. I think like I did 3 or 4 rounds since some of these changes came in, because I think the writing is on the wall that they're not going to do discounts. They're just going to give you more bronze. So that, now if they end up doing discounts, I'll be a little bit sad, but at this point, bronze is so readily available that I'm feeling quite a bit different about it. It's like, okay, well, if that's really the case, if they end up discounting it, it's like I only spent like realistically like a week's bronze or something on upgrading the stuff. So it's okay. I'll just I can still get some more upgrades or what have you. But there was like a little bit of paralysis there for me because, without being able to see the shape of all the changes, it's like, is this the right decision? But I think like you could really see the through line here of how they're sort of tweaking this mode, and like the devs want you to be doing something like just out there doing stuff and acquiring bronze, but I don't think they're going to budge on the prices anytime soon.
Yeah, I do find that paralysis is very easy to get into, and the symptom that causes that, the thing that ends up causing that more often than not, is the lack of communication as to what the objective is. They did hotfixes 4 days in a row last week, dramatically changing bronze gain and powering up and that kind of aspect of your character. And they did all of that without putting out a post saying, hey, this is the direction we're moving in. Like they didn't do that. And I think that's a very strange thing to do because they're clearly moving in a direction. We know they are, but they haven't communicated to the broader player base, hey, we are looking at the cost of upgrades. We are considering changing the cost of upgrades. We're considering changing this. We're considering doing that. And the moment you start putting those factors out to players, you can start to alleviate some of that paralysis that can happen, or at least give people an idea of when it's going to end. Because it sucks to be in a position like you were where, hey, I have 200,000 bronze. And you know what? I could buy all the tier sets that I want to buy for all the raids for all my characters. I could do that with that much bronze. However, what if I do that and then tomorrow they hotfix the cost of all the tier sets to being a fifth of what they were previously? Well, now I feel like I got completely ripped off and have blown all of this currency that I could have actually spent on other things. Yeah, I agree. And I think that it's wonderful they're charging ahead with getting these hot fixes in. And it's great that we're getting notes like this and that feedback's being listened to. I think this honestly speaks to how small their CM team is at the moment. I think their community management and community facing team is quite overwhelmed with the amount of versions of World of Warcraft and the amount of information about World of Warcraft that's coming out right now. And, layoffs happened. And I think maybe we're seeing the result of that in some of these situations where they just don't have the amount of people around to be able to handle the workload of trying to communicate about Cataclysm Classic and Mists of Pandaria Remix and, the Alpha for War Within and Dragonflight changes and, Season to Discovery things. And it's like, oh my goodness. Okay, there's so much stuff to communicate here that we're getting some things, but we're not getting that sort of like nice follow through that happens with a lot of this stuff with some of these posts.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, it's like the most, it's the most publishing they've done around World of Warcraft at any one time ever in the game's 20-year history. So,
and it's like the smallest their community team has ever been, or something like that, since like we saw Cataclysm launch or something like that.
Since like the Zarheim days or something maybe. But like, I some kind of, I think like something like that would have been nice if there was some kind of more declarative thing in blue text of like, listen, this is sort of our philosophy for how we're going to continue to shape this mode. I think, the fact that they haven't said anything about it and that they haven't changed any of that stuff yet, but they're massively buffing bronze from all these other places just kind of tells me what I need to know for the way that I approach the game. So I think it would probably be good for them to do that more broadly. I think there's ways you could do that without, showing players your hand. Like you don't want to like tell players exactly what is happening or whatever necessarily.
Well, making a statement like hey, we're not going to discount upgrades, but we will increase bronze acquisition. That's all you need. And you're like, oh, okay, good.
You could even be like more, you could be even more ambiguous than that kind of, because you say, our goal is sort of to move in the direction of, upping rewards for stuff and not doing discounts or something, something like that. I think would be enough for people to get the idea. But I don't know. As these changes came in, that really just broke up the paralysis for me, because it's like I believe in my heart that they're not going to do discounts. So any bonds I have, I should be spending
when we get discounts.
Yeah, right. But like by the time they do that, then it's like, all right, well, look how much I already benefited from the upgrades I bought. It's like because then you get into the thing of like the longer you wait to do it, now you're just like leaving all this power on the table. Like it's kind of a dangerous game to play with yourself, which is why I just had to say, you know what, like I'm doing it. I'm buying the upgrades, and I'm gonna feel good about it.
Good. Okay. The 22nd had some more updates. This was the Nostwind now sells the Glyph of Shadow for priests. If people are wanting their shadowy forms, you can actually get your shadowy form on your mount and everything now, which is cool. They improved the respawn rate of treasures and rares and rare elites across Pandaria. So if you're someone who is out there farming for treasures and everything, that's a much better experience for you, as well as increase the amount of bronze increase the amount of bronze they raised the drop rate of threads of time from the airborne bronze. So the stuff that you sort of fly around and collect in those orbs, there's more bronze you get from those, and you can actually get threads from those, which is pretty cool. So yeah, definitely worthwhile flying around and grabbing all those things if that's something you're wanting to do.
Oh yeah, don't take any flight pass anywhere, man.
Oh yeah, no, Dragon Ride everywhere for sure.
Yeah, like you want to fly through the airborne bronze, and also like the respawn rate on the treasures and rares, rare elites is huge for doing the achievements I was talking about at the top of the show, because they're related to basically every zone. So getting those more often is good. Plus, the rares became a really good source of epic threads and prismatic gems. And most of the rares drop like 3 or 4 epic threads when you kill them at least. The ones in around Ordos on Timeless Isle drop even more than that. So yeah, that was really nice. More rares up more often is better. It's just way more stuff you can go get. It's a nice little pit stop or whatever on your way to the next world boss.
Yeah, exactly. And then on Thursday, normal scenarios, normal dungeons, heroic scenarios, heroic dungeons, and the daily Infinite Bazaar quests now award a cache containing 5 times more bronze, as they normally did. And they intend for players to earn more bronze as you level up, so you can more easily start purchasing upgrades and rewards. At level 70, these caches should now reward 8,750 bronze, whereas previously it was 1,750. So we're talking about, well, 5 times as much, right? Like that's what we're talking about. Bronze previously as you used to be able to get. So this bronze is from this is the total bronze from the daily loop. It's not per cache, so just keep that in mind as well. This is not like, hey, yes, every cache you open gets you almost 9,000 bronze. That would be crazy.
Maybe someday, maybe by August.
Yeah, maybe by August, who knows?
Like when I read this on Friday, I was like, what? But then I read it, it was not worded the best, but yeah, basically these caches were 250 and they went up to 1250 a piece.
Yeah.
So like once they did this, then I started looping in, okay, I'm gonna do a normal scenario every day. I'm gonna do a normal dungeon every day, you know, which is stuff I wasn't really doing because there wasn't kind of that hook as much, you know. But once it was like, okay, I'm getting a legendary spool and 1,250 bronze for doing a normal scenario, like I'm doing that. I will be in the queue. No worries there. So yeah, it's been real lucrative here for the last few days for sure. It feels nice, you know, and it's also a thing that I like about it for my approach is it's very predictable, right? You know, like, okay, you're going to get at least this much every day of not only the legendary spools, it's random stats, but like your goal is just to stat up your cloak and get your other stuff leveled up. So it doesn't really matter what you're getting because you're just getting stats.
Right.
And then to have like, okay, I know I'm getting at least this much bronze just from doing these activities, and everything else is on top of that. Anything that I shard or scrap or whatever, you know, that's all getting added into the pool too. Achievements, whatever, I'm getting more stuff. But I know if I do this stuff every day, I'm getting, you know, 8,750 bronze no matter what, and then everything else is on top of that. So
right.
I like to sort of be able to have all that handy where it's like, okay, I can feel good about spending this much bronze because I know that by tomorrow or by this other point in time, then I'll have made this much, and then I can kind of, you know, I don't know, think of like a budget basically for what I'm spending.
Yeah, no, it definitely is easier knowing, oh, okay, this is very achievable within one gaming session to get almost 9,000 bronze, which means that if you spend 5,000 bronze a day, you're actually in the plus side, or you don't have to do all these activities in that one day in order to get that 5,000 bronze a day, which is nice to see. But the next point we want to talk about here is actually a larger discussion that's been taking place in the community for a little bit. It is about frog farming, because, hey, it went from like frog farming to troll farming to goat farming to all sorts of things. So now, basically, Kaivex has come and weighed in and says, we've been monitoring the impact of gulp frog farming that some players did during the first 3 days of WoW Remix. And just to be clear, gulp frog farming was actually a thing that happened back in Pandaria. Way back in the day, I did this. I went out there with my Brewmaster Monk friend, and I healed him as we farmed the crap out of gulp frogs to get reputation and other things back in the day. Like, this isn't like a new concept for MoP Remix. But yes, they've been looking at this for people who actually did this in the first 3 days. They've also been working on ways to respond to player feedback about bronze acquisition, increased higher difficulty at higher levels, and feeling too far behind for those who took advantage of the frogs. Now, here's the interesting thing, right? There's the feeling of feeling too far behind, like, oh, that person has become an unachievable level of power. I'm never going to be able to catch up with them. There's no real catch up inside Mists of Pandaria Remix. Again, I mentioned this last episode. There's no like, hey, this person is able to do more DPS than me inside of a raid. So I somehow feel worse about what I'm doing because they got to go on frog farm and I didn't. It's about having the accessibility for other players who want to put the time into to be able to achieve that level of power. And by removing the frog farming and removing the troll farming or removing these other things, you are slowly closing off ways of players being able to access that level of power. So they did something about it. A small number of players received an extreme advantage that distorted the gameplay experience for Summon WoW Remix. With hotfixes later today, May 24th, we will adjust characters with an unreasonably large number of Gulp Frog kills prior to the loot bug fix, and those players will see the power of their cloak infinite potential reduced to an amount that a very engaged player could responsibly achieve. This change will have a larger impact on players who took advantage of the situation for longer. For everyone who did not take advantage of this situation, we're providing 3 additional quests with large bronze rewards at levels 50, 60, and 70. These quests will become available from Momentous, the item upgrader in Jade Forest Infinite Bazaar. These milestone quests will grant characters an additional 3,000, 7,000, and 30,000 bronze, respectively. The level 70 time runners will be able to complete all 3 quests immediately for 40,000 bronze when this change takes effect. Characters that killed an unreasonable number of large gulp frogs will not be eligible for these quests. We believe these milestone quests and the additional bronze they grant will make playing Remix more rewarding for primary and secondary characters for the duration of the event. Players who chose to use this bronze to upgrade their gear or purchase cosmetic rewards from the Infinite Bazaar, depending on their personal goals for that character. These milestone quests will be available for all time running characters that are leveled up during the duration of the event. We continue to monitor, gameplay and feedback. Please leave more feedback, etc. So I've seen some large discussion about this. There are people who claim that they barely killed any frogs and got flagged. They went out and watched people kill frogs and got flagged. Like, I don't know what everyone's personal thing was that happened. I just know that a bunch of accounts got flagged and they can't get this 40,000 bronze from doing these 3 quests. However, they can on their alts and they can on any other character they play. And this is what's getting me back into wanting to play an alt. As I look at the situation, I'm like, oh, okay, great. My main, who's still not 70 yet, could certainly benefit from these quests. And if I level up another character, I could benefit from these quests, and another character I could benefit from these quests. And every time I do that leveling path of getting someone to max level, I get 40,000 bronze. Well, now all of a sudden, leveling becomes an exciting thing for me, because it used to be that I would level to max level, and at this point, I think I'm 66 or something like that, and I think I have just under 20,000 bronze. So again, I don't feel like I'm going to have 40,000 bronze by the time I'm at max level based off of the rate that I'm moving at. But this will be one of those situations where, hey, you know what? It's okay. I can do these 3 quests, regardless if I only earn 10,000, bronze during the leveling portion of this. I'll end up with 40,000 more when I hit max level. And that's 10 transmog sets from the epic transmogs from raids. That's a whole bunch of other things I can buy. And when I level the next character, I can do it again. And I think that is very enticing for players to do this. I still think the cloak should probably be 150% experience gain over top of 100% for the initial starting place. But if you start a new character and, after 10 levels hop into LFR, like as early as you possibly can, might be 20 levels in, you hop into LFR, you're going to get a bunch of more cloak stuff. And then that'll help you get up towards that 200 or 250% pretty quickly on your cloak. And that character should level up fairly fast. I think ideally I'd like to see the ability for me to level a character to 70 in 6 hours, 7 hours tops, I think would be where I'd want that to sort of start living, so that, over a weekend, it's pretty easy to knock a character out during this event for most players. And I think that would be a pretty fun place to land at. And it seems like they're moving that direction, which again is for me like, hey, maybe if I just chill out for like a couple of weeks on this, I'll really feel like the time I'm putting into it is hitting the reward path that I want to be earning from this. My own personal way of playing the game at the moment is wanting events like this to just hand me things. And it seems like they're moving in that direction, and Blizz is kind of getting that idea. So I'm hoping that we continue to move that way.
Yeah, I mean, I started up at alt this weekend because I want to get the trading post recolors for the class armor and weapons, right? I want to get the monk stuff, and so I came in with, the rank 12 cloak or whatever it is that you start with if you get all the achievements done on another character, and like I'm just killing everything in one hit. All the quest mobs just immediately explode, and I think I got like 2 levels before I even got to the first village that you get to in the story or whatever, which is cool. And I don't know, this might be enticement enough to take that character and level up more to get that 40k, because that's like the most expensive stuff is 38.5 right now. So you level to 70 and you walk away with enough to buy a mount of your choice, basically. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a very controversial change because you're taking, power away from players. My hot take is that they should have done this, and it's good that they did it. It's a shame that they skipped this way and that they couldn't do it sooner. But like obviously this isn't what you should be doing, and it's like the loot cave problem from Destiny 1 from like 10 years ago. Like yes, it's like it's lucrative, but it's anti-gameplay, and you don't want to. You can't turn a blind eye to this and just have it be. What you do is you log into Mists of Pandaria Remix, you go to Timeless Isle, and you kill frogs until you log out, until you get sick of it and you leave, because that's the quote unquote like correct, best, optimized way to play the game. Like the whole point of this event is re-experiencing Pandaria content, and there's a lot of it, and it's all on offer to you immediately, right? So I think it was a good decision, and if you did this and you got hit, you probably still came out okay. The problem is, the people who got flagged but hadn't actually done enough of this to really get a huge benefit from it, because they pulled everybody back to, if you were flagged as a frog farmer, you got pulled back to one baseline that they established. So if you barely hit that standard, then you basically were unchanged. Whereas if you zoomed past it, if you're just grinding frogs for 72 hours, then okay, yeah, they rolled your cloak back, but you probably got way more than 40k bronze from that, right? And they didn't roll your item level back. So if you accumulated all that bronze and like spent it to max out your gear, they didn't change that. So I think some players probably got punished unnecessarily harshly, and some players like essentially didn't really receive a punishment, right? Like if you think about it in a certain way, like yeah, their cloak got de-leveled, but by the point that they're at in their overall gearing, it's like what does it even matter? You can still you're still going to be super powerful in anything that you do in this mode, and also your cloak is just going to catch back up as you continue to do stuff. It's not like they reset your cloak. So I think it does, but it gets a bit messy, and I think that's why historically they don't do stuff like rolling back player progress or whatever unless it's a really extreme situation, and I think this was one. I think this was really skewing the whole experience, because first of all, a lot of people are running Narcissus, which is understandable for many uses, and one of the big ones is the Narcissus dev made like a superior gem socketing UI to what's included with the game.
I want to. They made a
True.
UI. There is no UI
Right.
in the game. Like, just to be clear,
there's just like the standard, bags and click.
They launched this feature for Mists of Pandaria Remix without any UI for managing gems or anything other than, like, as you said, the default, like clicking on something, removing gems one by one, clicking on something, putting gems back. It's brutal for dealing with. And 2 major add-on creators were able to put together add-ons that manage gems better than the base UI in less than 2 days after this went out, which is why I struggle with things like this, where it's like, God, like, is no one like, hey, we should do something like this? Like, in any of these situations, like, it clearly did not take these individual add-on developers very much time to put something together that worked for this, that is substantially superior. And the one that the one for Narcissus is wonderful. Like, it's very well done. It automates a lot of things for taking gems in and out. It shows you collections. It's very well done. And so you're like, okay, like, Blizz, little effort here. Come on now. Like, just a little, like, I have to hope that after Narcissus did what they did, Blizz just goes, yeah, we're going to do something like this. Going forward, gems and everything be managed through something like that. Like, I just hope that they just internally are like, yes, this just makes sense. This is better. Let's just do this. Like,
right. Man. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's unwieldy for sure. But the problem with Narcissus is that it's got like a tracker that shows you like how many threads you've collected for your cloak and how you compare to other players on your server. And so this, like, that alone has just like ruined people's experiences with Remix, which, like, this mode is not about that, but and yet here we are, with this thing of like, okay, what's your server rank on your, and I'm sure that people are using that for, pug group invites, like, anyway, anything that you could do like that to like establish some kind of baseline that you can have an excuse to like exclude somebody. That is how WoW players operate largely. That's the state of things, and so I think that soured a lot of people's early experience and whatever. Also, like, I don't know in some cases if it's issues with like scaling or what, but almost everything I do in Remix, if it's with anything bigger than like a scenario, right? So anything with like at least 5 players in it, there will always be somebody who's just blasting, doing like 3 million DPS or like somewhere
like
above
level
like
27.
700K.
It'll be ridiculous.
Yeah, and it's like nobody else is contributing any actual damage to the process. And like, I play a tank. I really don't care. All I want to do is for the boss to die or whatever. I want the thing to die and I want to loot it. Like, so I don't care if the whole bar is just one player. But like, I could see how if your job on your character is to be the one doing the damage, that you don't like that. And I mean, a lot of times it is low-level players. I did a heroic dungeon this week where our top damage was the healer. It was a priest who was just like running around blasting everything with low-level priest, damage spells. That was like top damage. So there's like weird stuff like that, but that the point of the mode is not really. It's not like logs and parses.
It's just as close to a single-player experience as you're going to get in World of Warcraft so far when it comes to this sort of thing, in the sense of what you are doing on your character should not be compared to other people at all in this game mode, ever in this game mode. There's just no reason for it to happen.
I really don't think so, because there's just so many variables and it's so unpredictable, and like how flexible the game mode is awesome, because we want to be able to play with whoever, and we want there to be low stakes and low barrier to entry to stuff, right? Like, oh, my buddy's starting up a new character, we're just going to go do dungeons together even though we're 50 levels apart, right? Like, that's really cool. But yeah, it does create some of those problems, and some of those problems could be related to very high item level, and I got to think that if your gear is maxed out, like, you could probably solo end game content, like you're 200 item levels above the
for sure. And that was the dev stated that's an objective. They actually stated that by the end of this, they expect to see players soloing mythic content.
Right. If you kind of zoom ahead to almost the end of it, because your gear is 3 months ahead of schedule, and then you're in a queue with somebody in an LFR or something, and players feel bad, like, there's probably no fix to that to like make that not feel bad, but I think there is like sort of a mindset shift that is necessary for a lot of players to really enjoy this mode, because it's very different than what we typically play in WoW. But that said, like, I do think a lot of these changes that they brought in this week really help with that, because I think you have clear objectives for how to power your character up, and you get more rewards for time investment in the mode. The adjustments to the frog farmers are not a perfect solution to the situation that really Blizz created. It is Blizz's fault. But I do think like the sort of gift of 40k bronze to people that didn't get flagged, and then these ongoing, okay, just make a new character then if you want more bronze, like, you can go get it. I think it's okay. I think it's a decent middle ground, but the biggest thing is they've sort of built in these, I don't know what you call it, like road markers or whatever, for sort of like, check this out, do this stuff in Remix, and there's some really cool rewards on offer if you do it. And I think at the end of the day, like, that's going to make people have more fun with the game than trying to really tightly balance, like, okay, this character shouldn't be doing 83% of this group's damage or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my personal feeling on it, because I just want to kill bosses and have fun. That's what I'm in Remix for. So I'm not too hung up on like, how come this Shadow Priest isn't doing any damage compared to this other player. Like, who cares? Like, did the boss die? Did we get our threads and our bronze? Then I'm
take
chilling.
less than a minute. Yeah, exactly.
Right. I'm happy with that. But I understand that that's not everybody's experience and that's not everybody's approach to the game. But I do think you it behooves you to kind of have that shift. Like, we're in wacky time. This is a totally wacky mode. This is not balanced. It's not optimizable even, so just go have fun with it if you can.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is that this particular change that we're talking about inside this particular post that they put out just made it more encouraging for me to actually level other characters. That's really what I wanted. The first motivation was, hey, it's going to be so fast to level other characters, and I was like, well, it's actually not as fast as I hoped it would be. I'm not really sure. I still want to get bronze rewards. Should I be putting my time towards my main or leveling alts, et cetera, et cetera? This was almost a passive way of building in, hey, you know what? People want to level characters can level characters. They can do it inside the outdoor world, and you can end up with enough bronze to buy something at max level, start a new character, do it again. That's great. That's what I want. I want that loop. So they're starting to shape that loop, and that's something
like, it's sitting there, right? And it's like a huge, you get the character out the other side of the event, plus, you get all this currency in the event. Like, just really sweetens the deal quite a bit.
Yeah, exactly. All right, moving on to War Within Alpha. We did get the changes that we talked about last week, but we actually have numbers now. The talent loadouts, which we said were going to be increased last week, we actually have the number. They're increasing to 40 from 10. So apparently they've decided that the amount of space they can allow per account inside of those text files that they have to save on their own servers, could be increased by about 4 times. So yeah, you can...
We were talking about this in the show last week, and the blue post from the developer was kind of nonchalant. It's like, it's a lot of space in the server per account, so we got to be careful with it. But like, we are going to increase it in War Within.
Yeah,
I was thinking we'd get like 15 or maybe 20, but instead they just shoot straight to 40. So that's really cool. This is great for especially like druids, so if you like to play multiple different specs, very nice, and way above and beyond what I was expecting when they said they were going to increase it.
Yeah, because we'll see people doing, here's my build for different dungeons, here's my build for different affixes, here's my build for delving, here's my build for raiding, here's my build for doing this role in raiding, that role in raiding. You can add up a lot of these things really quickly, so it's great to have a nice hefty amount that you're allowed to actually save, so that's cool. All right, this was a much more controversial change. Removing the increased melee range talents across the game. This means Astral Influence and Acrobatic Strikes are gone. Default melee range has increased since these talents were originally created, so they now allow specs to attack from well outside of what it appears to be they should be able to. So they make the melee experience inconsistent across classes, and they're not happy with it, so they're removing it. I know a lot of very upset feral druids. I'm just saying, there's not a lot of them out there, but all of them I know are very upset about this change, as well as Guardians.
They were upset to begin with because they're feral druids.
I know,
but this is a little gnarly.
It's rough. The Guardian druids are like, dude, that's my swipe. Like my AOE range for pulling threat is now lower. For all the ferals, again, same sort of idea. Like, if something is 8 yards away, I now can't hit it with a swipe. This kind of sucks. That was something I could do before, and now I can't, which means that just affects them across the board. So this will be some relearning for sure for some classes. I would not be surprised at all if we saw a revert on this. That would not surprise me if there was enough player feedback saying, whoa, we don't like this, that we would see something change about this.
The thing that I think of is the rationale here is they make the melee experience inconsistent across classes.
Agreed.
That's absolutely true, and I understand that. But I think the other side of that coin is like, dude, Acrobatic Strikes has been in the game since what, Legion? Like my good rogue buddy, like my very good WoW friend, we always play stuff together. He's played Combat Outlaw like primarily in the 11 years we've been playing together, and he's always chosen Acrobatic Strikes, and that's his play style. He's gonna have to like relearn what melee range is in War Within if this holds up, because He's not used to playing with traditional melee range, right? So I don't know. I think maybe a consistent experience across classes is not necessary. That is in itself, to me, is not a net good. Like, you have different classes for a reason, because they present variety and they present different play styles. And I think when it's not like acrobatic strikes is a, they took a flyer on it in with 10.2 or something, and they don't like how it's working out. Like, this has been in the game for years, so it is going to be, if it holds up, it is going to be a relearning process. I'm just not, like, maybe there's more to it. I'm just not sure that the justification they give in these notes is that strong. Like, I don't think consistency across classes is really a goal when it comes to play style that they should follow, right? Like, you want classes to be consistent in terms of their ability to perform a useful role for their group or whatever, bring a utility or be able to handle certain types of mechanics or do enough damage to do whatever. I don't know that you need the classes to play in a more homogenous way. I think it's better for classes to have this sort of spikiness to them. So, I don't know. I saw this and I just got immediately bummed for my buddy, because his extended melee range is just, it's so precious to him. So we'll see how it continues to shape up.
I'm with you. I think it's strange to go, hey, you know what? If this person's playing a warrior and then they go play a druid, it's going to feel really different melee wise. And you're like, well, but shouldn't it? Like, just,
right. That's why they made a different character and are playing it, right? Because it feels different. I mean, again, like, I think there is something to be said for, like, okay, melee range is this is the rule of combat, and this is how it, like, I mean, that's a debate.
But these were talents that extended it, right? Like, this was a choice to extend it, right? So it's a tricky thing to me to, I guess, it almost feels like punish existing players by removing this. Anyways, we'll see what ends up happening with it. Like I said, wouldn't be surprised if we saw enough feedback come out that they sort of reverted some of that entirely. As far as user interface stuff goes, most world map icons can now be super tracked by left clicking. You can also have some examples like around these events, rares, rare elites, bonus objectives, flight masters, dungeon and raid entrances, and more. You can just, super track them that way. Upon learning dynamic flight, the dynamic flight talent tree is now accessible via the button in the mount journal. Thank goodness. This was those like ongoing process. At first it was a script, and then it was talking to Questosaur, and now it's actually a button inside of the game. We were watching development in its natural habitat as it goes on. So yes, this is a good change as well.
Yeah, awesome change. Yeah. You don't have to run a script to pop open your window or whatever. I mean, like, obviously they were never going to ship the game that way, right? Yeah. But like, for those of us who have been testing, and I haven't jumped into testing for a couple weeks now because just so much other stuff to stay busy with, but nice addition. And I'm wondering, like, the new tracking sounds pretty cool, but I wonder if it doesn't, they don't say, but I wonder if it applies to like World Quest. Could I finally get rid of World Quest tracker after all these years? Because the built-in like UI for tracking World Quests is still pretty bad. So it would be cool if I could just say, hey, I want to track this World Quest until I finish it, and I want it to stay right there in the bottom right of my screen or whatever for as long as I tell you to have it stay there. That'd be great. But yeah, I mean, this is, there was a lot of class updates. We're not going to get into the weekly alpha class update rotation beyond like, the hero talents or whatever. Like we got Deathstalker Rogue this week, but like, yeah, there was a bunch of Death Knight changes, a bunch of other stuff. Like, it's too much and it's too nebulous because we're not near release, right?
Oh my God, they made Death Knight abilities hit 10% harder. You're like, that doesn't mean anything.
There's no context for it, and it's going to change a lot. So it's just not really, I don't feel like we can contextualize it for the listener in any way that makes sense. But you'll notice, like, this build did not include any new content, right? There's not a new zone, like there's not new stuff to go play in this build. So I think we must be getting pretty close to the beta tag, and I think once we get the beta tag, I'll feel a bit better about putting some time in, because I don't want to make a new character every week, you know?
Yeah,
I mean, I guess
character
at this
copy,
point, I guess I wouldn't have to because we aren't getting that kind of rollout. But
there'll
maybe
probably be
beta
a
this
wipe
week or
with
something.
beta. There'll probably be a wipe with beta, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I would assume so. Yeah, but maybe beta this week. You know, I'm thinking we're getting pretty close because they're not adding big chunks of stuff to alpha right now. They're starting to, you know, stitch all the pieces together. So it might be beta time.
All right, where's John Jagger? Because they've done something for John that I feel like has been in the works for a long time. And for those of you who remember back in the Azeroth Roundtable days, John always complained about having to go into raids to learn the story and figure out what the story is. Well, guess what? Limestone, the WoW developer, says, hello. We've been working on a new raid experience for the War Within called Story Difficulty. Throughout World of Warcraft's history, many of the most epic moments in our stories have been told in dungeons and raids. With the recent introduction of follower dungeons, we've been examining new ways for players to see those stories, especially for those who may not feel comfortable playing within the social expectations of group environments. With story difficulty in Nerub Palace, our goal is to offer players a way to see the epic conclusion of the Kahet's story who may not see the end of that story otherwise. This difficulty is intended for a private party of 1 to 5 players and will allow players to face off against Queen Ansarek without the assistance of other players or followers. This encounter features reduced combat complexity and difficulty, instead focuses on narrative elements of the encounter. The story difficulty is intended to be experienced as a one-time per chapter in the game's story, but is repeatable for players who want to revisit that part of the adventure. We currently plan to release this experience alongside the final wing of the LFR difficulty for players who reached the appropriate point in the questing experience within War Within. We'd love to hear feedback once this feature is released. So rejoice, John, because you have single-player story raids where you can hop in and complete that storyline that you have been playing through and see the whole storyline through in a less complex and the sort of raid experience for you. But the thing to me that stands out to this the most is I really wonder if a cool way to do this is, you know, all those NPCs that are your allies that are supposed to be doing something, but they just stand there and wait at the outside of the fight. Just have them come in and beat the crap out of the boss while you're there. Like,
well, yeah, that'd be
you
cool.
know, like
they don't tend to do that as much as they used to. But
man, Lore Master Cho was like the king of this. All right,
yeah,
he was there for the whole thing.
Khadgar was another one.
Khadgar,
like, you guys go take care of this. Yeah, this is a super cool addition. It got data mined, right? Like you can't go do this right now, obviously, but it was data mined, which prompted a post on the forums about it, which prompted a dev response.
Yeah.
Just to kind of set expectations about what it is and isn't, which I think was really smart because you hear, oh, story mode raid got data mined, and then people's brains just go,
explode,
at light speed into like whatever. What it was sort of like the whatever the new classic thing was going to be leading up to BlizzCon last year. You know, it was like
Classic Plus.
Yeah, Classic Plus is what they were kind of is what the community kind of adopted to call it, and it was like. That means a different thing to every single person that hears it, right? And story mode raid, I feel like could be the same thing. So I'm glad they got a post out about it super early, just to kind of talk about what it is and isn't.
Yeah.
I think this is a great addition and probably long overdue. But you know, follower dungeons were the same kind of thing, right? And the dev here does sort of reference this as sort of an outgrowth of the follower dungeon system, even though you don't take followers into this.
Yeah.
But it's sort of that idea of like instanced content for a solo player or a smaller group of players than the content is really designed for, that we fill in with, you know, NPCs, or we kind of scale down to them or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome, especially because it lets you see maybe really cool rewards behind defeating the last raid boss, either through the, you know, quest to go defeat them, and then they award, you know, I don't know, you get some cool cosmetic or something unique from doing the quest. You could do that, and then like everybody has access to it, however they play or whatever character they want to play on. I think that it could, you know, it could introduce a nice reward structure around it that isn't tied to like gear or character power or whatever. It's just like you can experience the whole story, you play through the quest story, and then you see like the logical end of it in the fight. and then whatever IGCs or whatever are attached to the end of the fight, you know, that alone in itself is very good. And then if they tie other stuff into it, like some kind of quest rewards or whatever, then it's even better. So
Yeah.
I think follower dungeons are really cool. Like I've enjoyed doing them this expansion. It's been a really nice addition, and I think, you know, any way that you can kind of repurpose this instance content for more people to be able to check it out in more different ways, it's just a big win. I like the fact that you could do it with a group. Like you could bring a couple friends along and you guys can do it together and just see, you know, what happens in the story. That's a nice element. It is an MMORPG. You should play it with other players when you can. So that's great. I wonder, like, do we get to a point where does this preempt the need for like an LFR mode entirely? Right. I feel like LFR is increasingly the domain of the really engaged player, because it's like, okay, you take your alt stable through LFR every week and get your bullion and whatever, right? And it's, you know, it's not really serving the purpose of like, well, it lets people who aren't like active raiders see the raid. Like it does do that in a way, but it's still that, it's like what I was talking about earlier with the remix stuff. It's that optimized, you know, min-maxing gamer brain of like, okay, there are social expectations around it and stuff. Whereas this, there's really not. And so I wonder, like, does this actually serve the purpose for what you would think the target audience of LFR is better than LFR does? And what does that mean going forward, you know? But
I think LFR still serves the purpose of introductory raid gear for players. I think that still does. I mean, you could roll that into story mode, or make them kind of one actual game mode, which I'd be fine with when it came down to it. I don't mind people queuing up for a solo experience where they get LFR quality gear. I think that would actually probably be a more enjoyable experience than LFR currently exists. So I would be fine with one creating that. Just because the LFR experience right now is a struggle sometimes and can feel very daunting, and people get voted out all of the time just randomly, and like there's a lot of issues. You could end up wiping on this one boss over and over and over again multiple times because someone's trolling the group. And so there's just a lot of situations like that where, yeah, I think I could see a obviously lower amount of loot drop, because you're not dropping loot for every single individual player kind of idea. So similar to like what personal loot would do, kind of version of a story mode for LFR would be really fun. And you could see that get replaced that way. So yeah, I'm all for it. I think it's a great game mode. I think people have been asking for it, as I mentioned with John, for years. So I'm glad to see it happening, and I'm hopeful for what it could mean for the community and for those players who want to do raid, but at the same time feel very hesitant about doing group content. You know, maybe after they do this for maybe a major patch or two major patches, they actually start to dabble into doing more group-based stuff because they've actually experienced what it's like to be inside of a raid before. And maybe that's their limiting factor, right? They get their foot in the door, who knows? So hopefully that we can see some of that move along that direction.
Yeah, I think, you know, really what I guess what I would love to see come out of this is them really being able to offer cool, unique rewards tied to raid end bosses because story mode exists, right? Like,
yeah,
that's the most potentially exciting thing to me as a player, because it's like, well, if you get something cool for killing the end boss of the raid, then like, I mean, dude, I have so many alts that I would never raid on, right? Yeah. I don't really like the play style in endgame. Like I'm not going to try to play them in a raid, but if this is an option, then like, okay, maybe I do play through this campaign quest because at the end of it, I get to pick a really cool item for my class, or, you know, something like that. And you can put it in there with confidence that like, every player can experience this and accomplish this quest and receive this reward, right? So I think that opens up your options a lot to have cool quest rewards or whatever, you know, achievements or whatever tied to it, because you know that everybody can check it out. So yeah, that's what I would love to see tied to it going forward. I think it's a great addition on its face. Not super useful to me personally, but it could be. So yeah, it'll be cool to see what they end up doing with it.
Yeah. All right, that's going to bring us to the point of the show where I'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons. They contribute a ton to our show and help us improve on the content we create. I'm giving a special shout out today to Alianas, Arajian, James, Kapawi, Max, Pinky, Shorel, and Rager. Thank you so much for all that you give, as well as all of our other patrons. Thank you so much for what you give towards the show. We don't have any new patrons to announce today, but it is still going strong, and we thank you for helping us cover all the expenses. You can find our Patreon if you want to jump in and support the show at patreon.com/thestartingzone. And you can hop in there and join our Patreon. You get yourself a Discord role. You can see a special channel depending on what tier you're at, and see our show notes before the shows happen, and all sorts of stuff going on. So yeah, definitely hop in there, support the show. We really appreciate it. Thank you, patrons.
Absolutely. Thank you, patrons past and present, for helping make the show happen, keeping the show in production, keeping the archives online and all that stuff. It means a lot. We couldn't do it without you. So thank you for chipping in and for supporting what we do around here.
Yeah. With that, I guess if you want to contact the show, you can head on over to thestartingzone.com, the official website for the Starting Zone podcast. If you want to leave us a review on your iTunes, your Apple Podcast, you can do that by going on over to your iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and leave us one of those 5 stars, and we'll read it here live on the show. We don't have any to talk about this week either, but if you do leave one, we'll read it here live on the show, and they do help us boost up the charts, and more people find the show, so we appreciate it. So we're going to wrap up episode 633 of The Starting Zone. And if you want to find the actual website for it, it's thestartingzone.com. We're also on Twitter at The Starting Zone. And we also have a Discord channel, like I mentioned, startingzone.com/Discord. And Jason, where can folks find you on the internet?
The best place to find me, as always, is over on Twitter. You can find me over there at Shieldwald. You can also find me on Blue Sky. I'm just Jay Lucas over there. I don't really post a lot on Blue Sky at this point, but I am over there and I do read it and check it out. So if you want to say hi, find me over there. You can find the video channels at twitch.tv/Shieldwald and youtube.com/Shieldwald. It's been dormant. I don't know. Maybe I'll stream this week. I keep saying that. The thing is now it's starting to get hot out, and then my
it's
office,
very warm in the office.
My office gets really hot, and it's like I don't have my lights on. But I don't know. I mean, I will stream intermittently here and there, raid stuff and keystones and hanging out. And so keep an eye on it. Normally streams would be like Tuesday, Wednesday, Sunday. I don't know. I don't know what this week's schedule is going to look like, but check the channels out, and there will be stuff over there from time to time.
Cool. Trying to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Spencer_Downey. I'm also over on Blue Sky at SpencerHD. On Twitch, it's twitch.tv/SpencerHD. And on YouTube, it's youtube.com/@SpencerHD. And with that, for myself and Jason, we want to say thanks for listening, and jobs done.